In the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, tens of millions of people from Florida to the Appalachian Mountains were left to deal with the fallout. In North Carolina, the ensuing flash floods wiped out hundreds of communities, including Asheville, which suffered apocalyptic damage. Understandably so, many were focused on the recovery effort and getting much-needed aid to those affected by Helene. What was not focused on at the time was a new area of interest in the Western Caribbean and Southern Gulf. Just as Helene made landfall in Florida, another AOI was tagged in anticipation of another potential major tropical cyclone, but for several days, not much occurred, and it seemed that the odds for tropical development were dramatically decreasing by October 2nd. However, as time went on, the Central American Gyre began to deliver a nasty surprise for many in the Gulf region, particularly Florida and especially Tampa Bay. By the afternoon of October 4th, many were on high alert as a cluster of thunderstorms emerged from the gyre into the Bay of Campeche and began to rapidly organize. This unexpected surge in tropical activity would result in Tropical Depression 14 forming, only for it to strengthen to Tropical Storm Milton a couple of hours later. However, many did not foresee the insane amount of intensification and resilience Milton would have, with Milton explosively intensifying from a tropical storm to a Category 5 monster in the span of 48 hours, and tied with the strongest hurricane in the Gulf since Hurricane Rita in 2005. With an official pressure of 895 millibars, Milton became one of the most intense storms on Earth and would crash into the Tampa Bay region, causing catastrophic damage. In this documentary, I will be going over everything from Milton's rare origins to two separate Category 5 peaks to the aftermath and the devastation it left behind. This is Hurricane Milton, the Gulf's powerhouse of terror.
This is by far the most intense I've ever tracked. Now, it's not the most intense I've ever seen anywhere in the world, but in the Atlantic, it is.
Breaking news, Hurricane Milton has made landfall, and it has made a dent. Look at this. We're taking a live look now at Tropicana Field. The roof ripped right off of the stadium there. And this is just what we're beginning to see as we're starting to really get a sense of the extent of the damage there.
There it is.
Oh, wow.
There it is. There it comes. So again, right to east, that is the potential waterspout, potential tornado moving right over the Matlacha Bridge. Boy, oh boy. So look at this picking up, guys.
This is why you shouldn't be on the roads right now.
Yeah, this is a great reminder that this vehicle is stuck right in the middle. This is why we told you guys you had to evacuate early this morning.
As Helene was making landfall and decimating much of the southeastern United States, another area of interest was tagged by the National Hurricane Center on September 26th in the Western Caribbean Sea. This area of interest was initially expected to follow a similar path to Helene, maybe a bit further to the west, and it appeared to be that way as a tropical disturbance began to produce disorganized thunderstorms and broad rotation in the region on September 29th. This appeared to be a long-term threat, as this was not expected to develop in the next 48 hours, but had a 50% chance of developing in the next 7 days. This began to change on the morning of September 30th, as the disturbance was much further to the south than expected and headed towards Central America. It would then crash onto the coast of Nicaragua on October 1st, ending its chances of developing in the Caribbean as it moved over land. To many, this would be a non-story. The NHC gives a chance of development, disturbance forms, then unexpectedly crashed into land and busts. Right? Well, there is one problem. There is still a 40% chance of development, but by this time, the majority of that area is now in the Gulf of Mexico. What is going on? Well, the Central American Gyre became increasingly active during this period and produced a very large and very broad area of thunderstorms that range from the southwestern Caribbean Sea all the way to the southwestern Gulf. Because of that activity and an unexpectedly favorable environment for development, the NHC kept the chance of development, although it did decrease from 40% to 30% in the next 7 days on October 2nd. However, in that time, the NHC shifted the area out of the Caribbean Sea entirely, and it had it in the Gulf developing in the Bay of Campeche and heading toward Florida. This was a very head-turning case already, as this was a very rare scenario that was unfolding. It is quite rare for the gyre to develop a tropical cyclone in the Bay of Campeche, mainly because of the steering currents and the geography of the bay. For meaningful development to take place, you would need for the system to head east-northeast and towards Florida, a feat that, unless you have prime trough and ridge setups over the continental United States, was not going to happen. However, by October 3rd, the chance for development was starting to increase again as a cluster of thunderstorms was emerging off the coast of Mexico and was starting to gain rapid convection and organization. At 2 p.m. on October 4th, the NHC added a 10% chance of development in the next 48 hours marker to their advisory, as the gyre was already producing widespread thunderstorm activity and was only escalating by the hour. Things would only ramp up further, with a 3070 tag issued 6 hours later at 8 p.m. It was at this point that the system would be designated Invest 92L, and it would become apparent that the system was going to develop much earlier than anticipated. The cluster of thunderstorms would organize into a new closed low-pressure system by the morning of October 5th, and at 11 a.m., it developed into Tropical Depression 14. It initially moved very slowly, around 3 miles per hour to the north-northeast, but was expected to intensify quickly, reaching hurricane strength by the morning of October 7th, less than 48 hours after development. The track also had the system heading towards Florida, with the center expected to make landfall south of the Tampa Bay region. The initial peak intensity was set to 110 miles per hour as it approached Florida, but as time went on, it would only prove to be null and void, as the system rapidly organized and then rapidly escalated. Only 2.5 hours later, at 1:25 p.m., 14 was upgraded to Tropical Storm Milton, as satellite data showed quick strengthening and a developing core. Milton's intensification began somewhat modestly, with it reaching 45 miles per hour by 11 p.m., but in the early hours of October 6th, Milton would undergo arguably the scariest rapid intensification ever in the Atlantic Ocean. By 8 a.m., Milton was a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm, with hurricane hunters seemingly finding the storm stronger each time they passed through the rapidly consolidating core. By 5 p.m., Milton became a hurricane with winds of 80 miles per hour, up from 65 miles per hour 3 hours earlier, but the next 24 hours were about to shock the world. After slowing down its rate of intensification through the evening, it reached Category 2 strength at 5 a.m. on October 7th, with hurricane hunters in the storm to witness something only seen out of a movie. 2 hours later, hurricane hunters found that Milton was not just a major hurricane, but a major hurricane with rapidly intensifying and rapidly escalating winds, as winds jumped from 100 miles per hour to 120 miles per hour in only 120 minutes. The pressure also fell at a rate of 9 millibars per hour, going from 972 millibars to 954 millibars, and hurricane warnings were now issued for northern parts of the Yucatan Peninsula, with watches issued for much of West Florida due to the situation. Milton was also a small system, with hurricane force winds only extending outward 35 miles from the center, but small systems are very notorious for explosive intensification. Think of it as a figure skater bringing her arms and legs into her body. She will start to spin a lot faster due to the decrease in inertia and increase in angular velocity. This is what Milton was doing, and by the next emergency update at 9:05 a.m., Milton was a high-end Category 4 hurricane with winds of 150 miles per hour. Milton was intensifying so quickly that the NHC and hurricane hunters could not keep up with the rate of intensification. In 1 hour, Milton's official wind speed went from 125 miles per hour to 150 miles per hour, jumping an entire category in the Saffir-Simpson scale, and the pressure was falling at an average rate of 5 to 6 millibars per hour. To give you an idea of just how fast that pressure fell, a drop of 1 millibar per hour is considered rapid intensification, and this was intensifying 5 to 6 times faster for an extended period of time. The cherry on top was yet to come. At 11:55 a.m., Milton became a Category 5 hurricane, going from a 65 mile per hour tropical storm to a 160 mile per hour Category 5 hurricane in 24 hours. That is already scary enough, but considering it was going to bring impacts to the Yucatan and then Florida in just a couple of days, made it even scarier. While Helene is known for the catastrophic flash flooding in the Appalachians and pure destruction it caused across the southeastern United States, Milton was just behind it, known for its extreme intensification so close to home. As time went on, Milton would intensify even further, and by 5 p.m., the monster would reach its peak of 180 miles per hour with a minimum central pressure of 895 millibars, according to the postseason analysis. There is some debate on the intensity of Milton at that time, with some estimates as high as 190 miles per hour, but the point remains that this hurricane was one of the most intense hurricanes ever recorded in the Atlantic Basin. Milton also tied Hurricane Rita in 2005 for the strongest hurricane recorded in the Gulf of Mexico.
And this is definitely one of the most intense storms I've seen in the Atlantic in the time I've been tracking storms. I've only been tracking hurricanes since 2017, and this is by far the most intense I've ever tracked. Now, it's not the most intense I've ever seen anywhere in the world, but in the Atlantic, it is.
I was actually really impressed. I was actually really excited watching it all happen. I remember it was really small, and I just had a feeling like it could maybe wrap up really quick, and it sure did, and it actually did way more even I expected it to, and it bombed out. Like, literally, I remember one day I woke up, I think it was actually the last day of school before we're off because of the hurricane, and I remember seeing it was like a Cat 3 or 4. It was intensifying, and then I think I did like a assignment or something. Check my phone again, Cat 5, and then like 2 hours later it was like 180 miles an hour, and then the recon plane went there and she measured I forgot what it was. It was sub 900.
Yeah.
And I was impressed. It was crazy. It was a beautiful storm. It was the pinhole structure, the like really small core. It was a really unique storm.
As Milton reached this peak intensity, two things began to happen that would halt its intensification. The first was the core began to degrade and rip itself apart due to how intense Milton was. To give you an idea of how small it was, the eye was only 4 miles across, and the pressure gradient around the storm was intensely tight due to its small size. Because of this, once it reached its peak intensity, the structure began to slowly degrade and collapse in on itself. While this may seem unrealistic, and I know some of you are asking, how can a hurricane tear itself apart like that? Consider that the wind field on Milton was incredibly small, with tropical storm force winds only extending outward 80 miles from the center. That is the distance between Tampa and Orlando, Florida, as the crow flies. So think about how quickly those winds are going to pick up the closer you get to the eye wall, which was estimated to only be about 5 to 6 miles around the eye, and put 180 mile per hour winds in there. In certain circumstances, that can put a massive amount of strain on the structure of a hurricane, especially if that wind field is compressed in that small of an area. And that is exactly what happened to Milton. The structure began to collapse in on itself, and to stop that from happening, the second reason as to why Milton halted its intensification occurred. An eye wall replacement cycle began to get underway as Milton was peaking in intensity and slowly tearing its small core apart. An eye wall replacement cycle is when a secondary eye wall develops and overtakes the inner wall, weakening the hurricane but expanding the storm in size. Milton was tiny, and to keep its structure intact, it needed to expand outward. Think of that figure skater again. This time she's stretching her arms out, causing her to spin slower, but her size ends up increasing. As such, Milton began to weaken quickly, dropping to Category 4 strength at 2 a.m. on October 8th. Milton would weaken down to a 145-mile-per-hour hurricane with a pressure of 929 millibars by 8 a.m. as the cycle completed and the structure consolidated, with the wind field expanding outward to 105 miles from the center. However, things were about to go crazy again as Milton would defy the odds and go for round 2 of Category 5 strength. Milton began to re-strengthen at 11 a.m., reaching 150 miles per hour as the structure began to tighten once again and the eye began to get smaller. By 5 p.m., Milton pulled off the impossible and became a Category 5 hurricane again. Milton continued to rapidly strengthen, reaching a secondary peak of 165 miles per hour and a pressure of 902 millibars by 8 p.m. The fact that Milton intensified as fast as it did the first time around was shocking enough, but when it did it again, there's really no words to describe other than history was being made. Milton would maintain Category 5 intensity for 15 hours as it began to accelerate towards Florida and turn to the northeast compared to a due eastward track it was going on prior. As it approached Florida, there was a significant amount of wind shear building up as Milton began to turn towards Florida. It began to run into that shear, and this hurricane began to weaken. Milton would lose Category 5 intensity at 8 a.m. on October 9th as it moved towards Tampa Bay. Milton's structure would get torn apart as it approached Florida. However, that shear began to create a new threat: tornadoes. The SPC, or Storm Prediction Center, issued an enhanced risk for severe weather in Central Florida, with the 10% hatched risk being the main driver. A 10% hatched risk means that there's a 10% probability of an EF2 tornado or stronger occurring within 25 miles of a point. And because of the insane wind shear Milton was battling, it gave optimal conditions to produce significant tornadoes across Florida.
In the morning, it was sunny, and it just got hot, and it was just perfect. And so it allowed instability, and then as the clouds came in, and it just storms erupted like volcanoes. It was, and they're also really deep convective supercells too. A lot of tropical supercells are actually shallower on the outer bands. These were showing up as negative 80-degree cloud tops. These were full-blown supercells.
A total of 45 tornadoes were recorded from the outer bands of Hurricane Milton as the system approached the western coast of Florida. In this section, we will discuss 3 of the most intense tornadoes recorded in the outbreak. The first tornado was an EF3 tornado that touched down in Glades County, Florida at 2:24 p.m. on October 9th, causing significant damage in Lakeport with 3 homes losing their second stories. The tornado then moved mostly through rural areas, while causing extensive damage to trailer and mobile homes. The tornado then moved through the Brighton Seminole Indian Reservation, causing major damage to a sports complex before dissipating at 2:42 p.m. after leaving the baseball fields in that area. 3 people were injured, while the cost of the damage is unknown. The second tornado was another EF3 tornado that touched down at 4:43 p.m. in western Palm Beach County, Florida, and would begin to cause damage in western Wellington before destroying a double-wide mobile home. The tornado would then track through the area, causing significant damage to trees and homes before moving into Palm Beach Gardens. Here, the most intense damage of the tornado occurred in the Avenir neighborhood, where an unfinished Publix roof collapsed with vehicles being thrown into the parking lot. Multiple homes also had major damage to their roofs and windows, with vehicles tossed over 100 yards away. The tornado then struck Jupiter Farms before moving into Martin County and weakened significantly. The tornado would then dissipate at 5:30 p.m., leaving extensive damage behind, and while no one was killed, there were numerous injuries reported. However, the most infamous tornado of the outbreak was occurring at the same time as this one, and unfortunately, there would be more devastating impacts. The strongest tornado out of this outbreak was the Port St. Lucie tornado, and it would go down as one of the worst tornadoes to have been formed by a hurricane. This long-track tornado would touch down near the Creekside subdivision in West St. Lucie at 4:59 p.m. and would quickly cause extensive damage there and to the Sunnier Plains Park area, where homes lost their roofs and mobile homes were severely damaged or destroyed. The Spanish Lakes community would then get hit by the tornado, causing over 20 mobile homes to get destroyed, whereas the concrete structures sustained moderate damage. This is where all the fatalities of the tornado were, with 6 people killed and dozens more injured. The tornado then headed towards Vero Beach, where many were not aware of the impending danger and would be caught off guard by the tornado. This is where the most significant damage took place, as cars were flipped over, homes lost roofs and exterior walls, and several people were injured. On the Winter Garden Parkway outside of Vero Beach, Michelle Westfield, who had seen the tornado approaching the area, began honking her horn to alert residents and those in cars to seek shelter.
I just saw stuff flying and spinning and coming closer to me, and I didn't know what to do. I said, I can't go forward because that's where it is. So I just was terrified. So I put it in reverse and gunned it. Went flying backwards as fast as I could, laying on the horn and screaming.
This act of heroism undoubtedly saved many lives, as the tornado was at peak intensity around this time, and with significant amounts of flying debris, the tornado was causing significant damage. After leaving Vero Beach, the tornado tore through a small park before moving offshore and dissipating over the Atlantic Ocean at 5:30 p.m. In total, there were 6 fatalities with an estimated 30 people injured, and the damage totaled at over $500 million from this tornado alone. In addition, 25 people were rescued from the debris at the Spanish Lakes community by the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Department. This tornado rivaled many strong tornadoes in the Midwestern United States in a community that seldom receives such a strong system, but the fact that this was caused by Hurricane Milton makes this stand out. The whole tornado outbreak will go down as one of the worst tornado outbreaks caused by a tropical cyclone in history, and goes to show that enough wind shear can weaken a hurricane, but it also highlights an undervalued threat.
I remember it was pouring down rain here itself, so I was looking around like, there's actually another tornado that missed my house that I didn't know by a mile to the other direction, but this is a separate one. But I was like, it was so much going on, I didn't even know what to focus on. But this is in between cells. I remember looking out west between our houses, way in the distance. I see a little funnel on the ground. I was like, oh my God, there's another tornado out there. And you see in the radar, there's a big old couplet forming right there. And as it's heading up towards western Fort Pierce area, this thing just blew up. It became really intense. And I also saw views on just wedge tornado in areas that I was literally there 3 days ago. I was like, oh my God, this is unreal. And I heard it hit a community really hard. I'm like, oh no. Because where it hit, my grandma used to live really close to that area years back. So I'm really familiar with that area. And there's also I don't know if anyone heard, there's some red barn area in that area I used to go to all the time as a little kid. It was completely destroyed. It was really sad to see.
As the tornado outbreak was underway across Florida, Milton was making its final approach to the west coast of Florida as conditions began to rapidly deteriorate across the state. Milton continued to weaken and degrade in satellite appearance and weakened down to Category 3 intensity at 4 p.m. as the eyewall began to come ashore. Major flooding began to take place in the Tampa Bay region due to a significant storm surge, and the winds would cause major damage in the area, including tearing the fiberglass roof off of Tropicana Field, home of the Tampa Bay Rays.
Breaking news, Hurricane Milton has made landfall, and it has made a dent. Look at this. We're taking a live look now at Tropicana Field. The roof ripped right off of the stadium there. And this is just what we're beginning to see as we're starting to really get a sense of the extent of the damage there after Milton hit as a Category 3 storm with devastating winds and life-threatening storm surge at this hour.
Then, on October 9th, at 8:30 p.m., Major Hurricane Milton would make landfall just south of Tampa Bay at Siesta Key, Florida, as a low-end Category 3 hurricane with winds of 115 miles per hour. Milton would then carve through much of central Florida, bringing extensive damage to those who were in its path. However, in a stroke of good fortune, Milton would begin to move faster than expected, as it was originally forecast to move somewhat slowly over the Florida peninsula, staying over land for up to 18 to 24 hours. Milton completed its trek across Florida in 12 hours, weakening to a Category 1 hurricane with winds of 85 miles per hour. Milton then began to move quickly out to sea while rapidly losing its tropical characteristics, becoming a post-tropical cyclone at 2 p.m. on October 10th. The NHC would issue its final advisory 3 hours later, and the remnants would dissipate on October 12th, departing just as fast as it originated and explosively intensified. The damage Milton caused across Florida was catastrophic, likely helped by the impact of Hurricane Helene, as many communities recovered from the storm where Milton hit. Storm surge up to 10 feet caused significant damage to the Tampa Bay region and in many communities that were cleaning up the debris from Helene. While Milton never directly hit Tampa, the impacts definitely made up for it and exacerbated an issue that had been prevalent for decades, as Tampa had not been directly hit by a hurricane since the 1950s. And while the rest of the state improved their infrastructure to sustain a major hurricane impact, the Tampa region lagged behind, and Milton would make them pay the price for it. Hundreds of people had to be rescued across Hillsborough County, and millions lost power across Florida. In total, 42 people were killed by Milton, with approximately 50 people injured either by the storm itself or the tornadoes. Over $34.3 billion in damage was caused by Milton across the state, with most of it in western Florida. Milton would be retired by the World Meteorological Organization on April 2nd, 2025, and will be replaced by Miguel in 2030 when the list is reused.
No two hurricanes are the same, but you don't have to be right in the center to get impacts. Even if it's just wind impacts, you can still be like outside the core and still get somewhat damaging winds that can knock out power and all that. And like with Milton, undergoing that transition, this basically had like this swath of just larger winds over a really widespread area, and like I said, a pinpoint center. Mostly like these new construction homes in Florida, could, including my house, could handle some pretty big winds. So like usually like if hurricanes coming, usually just stay in a well-built home and you should be fine, especially a newer one. These older frame-built ones I'm definitely iffy on. And mobile homes, yeah, get out there, especially if it's like directly gonna hit you. And I guess it depends on the storm. And always prepare for, hope for the best, prepare for the worst is all I really gotta say.
Hurricane Milton was one of the scariest powerhouses ever produced by the Central American Gyre. Its rapid development and explosive intensification shocked a nation that was reeling from Hurricane Helene just 2 weeks prior, and as many communities were cleaning up, they instead turned to prepare for another monster storm headed their way. Milton was the most intense hurricane of the 2024 season, becoming the first hurricane to reach a sub-900 millibar pressure since Hurricane Wilma in 2005. Life is full of irony, and just as quickly as Milton intensified, it began to rapidly weaken as it approached Florida due to the intense wind shear as it crossed Florida and after landfall. Like Helene, there was some controversy regarding Milton's intensity at landfall, but the impacts were the same, and the communities that were impacted by Helene dealt with even worse damage from Milton. This hurricane proved that given the right conditions, history can be made, and unfortunately, it happened so close to land and would go down in history as one of the most destructive hurricanes in Florida history. Whether it was from the tornadoes it produced, or the catastrophic storm surge it brought to Tampa Bay, or forcing a Major League Baseball team to relocate for a whole season due to the damage caused at Tropicana Field, Milton will go down in history as the Gulf's powerhouse of terror.